Welcome to Marketing Made Simple TV. I'm Jeff Ogden, the host of the show, and we're thrilled to have you back once again. And we've got a great guest on the show. I mean, a real entrepreneur, a trailblazer, a guy that's founded a couple remarkable companies. Mark Ogden, the CEO of Influitive. So let's welcome Mark to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Jeff?
Hey, Mark. Good to have you. And like I said before the show, you and I met years ago. So it's good to reconnect with you.
Yeah, it sure is. Great to reconnect and us still in this amazing marketing technology space together.
It is, yes. So I'm going to start you off with it's a tradition on the show, Mark, and it's a very simple question. Every guest has answered this, from Guy Kawasaki to Daniel Pink to Beth Comstock. It's, who are you and what do you do?
Great question. So, as I said, I'm Mark Ogden. I am a serial entrepreneur. I've been founding businesses literally almost as long as I can remember. Since I was a wee lad. So really, it's the only thing I'm qualified to do. I think I've only ever had a real job for a maximum 18 months. I love starting companies, and there's nothing that gives me a greater thrill than to see a market develop and to see people develop inside my companies and go on to do other great things. And very excited about what I'm working on now with Influitive.
Sounds great, Mark, and we'll talk about Influitive in a little bit. But what I'd like to do is let's go back to an earlier thing you did, which is Eloqua. And I got to give you a lot of credit for that because you basically invented an industry, right? Before you started Eloqua, there's no such thing as marketing automation or revenue performance management. So tell us a little bit about what that experience was like. How did it come about? What were, one of the things I say is the road to heaven is paved through hell. So let's tell us about that experience, Mark.
Yeah, well, that is true. It was not easy, and I certainly did not do it alone. I mean, I had some amazing people that I worked with, and also stood on the shoulders of giants. I mean, Eloqua was actually not the first company of its type. There were other companies that were founded earlier in the late 90s. A company like Revenio actually comes to mind that they were not cloud-based. They were not multi-tenant cloud-based where we were at Eloqua, and now everyone understands and appreciates the benefit of being multi-tenant cloud, and I'm very grateful to my co-founders, Steve Woods and Abe Wagner, who that's all they ever built were cloud-based systems, even in the late 90s. Which allowed us to scale much more effectively than a typical software company could. But I was the oldest person in the company when I founded it at 25, and the idea came from my experience at Bain and Company when I did a lot of work with sales effectiveness cases. And what I had noticed when interviewing these sales folks, and them saying about how difficult it was to get in front of prospects, to get in front of prospects, and there was a technology that was disrupting them, and that was ubiquitous voicemail and call display, which was not allowing them to get in front of executives. How about that? And so. It really hit me in the heart hearing all these people who are struggling so much. At the same time, where all the best prospects were on the web. They're on the web. They're on email, so it didn't really take a rocket science to figure out that if you could connect qualified prospects to salespeople, and increasingly where that was the web and the internet. That there would be a business there somewhere. So that was really the blinding insight behind Eloqua. It really wasn't that insightful. And the first product we built was a chat product, actually, and sort of like a live person on steroids, and that wasn't that successful. And so we bolted an email engine onto it in order to drive more folks to go and chat. And then lo and behold, what we found almost by accident was that what sales reps really did like doing was interacting with prospects by knowing what they did on the website and then following up later on the phone. So really, it was a total accident. And after that, we built an automation engine on top of it. So I think what's interesting was that Eloqua from the beginning was all about maximizing sales effectiveness, even though we were a marketing tool. And I think that's what really kept us, being it kept us on the right path through a very difficult time between 2001 and 2003 by being laser focused on building tools that maximize the effectiveness of salespeople. So there was a lot of luck involved. We weren't able to raise any money. We raised $166,000, which got us to profitability. We almost went out of business 4 times. It was definitely difficult, but I think out of that difficult period was forged an amazing culture at Eloqua and allowed us to best a lot of much more well-funded players from Silicon Valley and places like that.
Very interesting, Mark, and I want to ask you more about that. Before we get into other things, I got to ask you about that T-shirt behind you. We can see over your shoulder that says "#1 fan." What's the story behind that, Mark?
That's great. Well, that's what the new what I think marketing is going next. And some of the insight that I had from Eloqua when we started looking at what was really effective in making some of these best-in-class buying processes. And what we found was, much to our chagrin, it wasn't actually our amazing software that was really doing it, even though that's what we were selling. It was these amazing advocates, these fans, these advocates, these promoters, often our happy customers that would be behind the scenes helping to help us close these deals in record time. And so we tried lots of different things to try to get more of this great advocacy. And not a lot really was successful, with the exception of the Marquee Awards, which was fantastic. But so the realization that I had at Eloqua even back in 2005 was, this is a new business. I mean, what we really need to do is provide an amazing experience for advocates, and if you give those people the experience that they're looking for, that they would reciprocate by providing some of that activity that we really need. Those references, those referral leads, those customer stories. Case studies, videos, and now social media mentions and contributions, which are so important. So that's what we do now at Influitive, is that we help companies mobilize their army of advocates. So that #1 fan thing is to show how important it is to get those fans that really all companies have, to get them supercharged and mobilized to do more of that activity that is so critical for us to build our businesses.
That's great, Mark, and I know you're doing great things at Influitive. Before we start talking about that, let's dive into a little of the issue of failure. You just said that you almost went out of business 4 times.
Yeah.
And I had, in an earlier show, I interviewed Zappos executives, and in their early days, they were just touch and go. I mean, they didn't know how they're going to make payroll.
Yeah.
So talk about the world of entrepreneurs and how you have to have that intestinal fortitude to go through those things.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, in our case, we actually did miss payroll for 9 months. And today there are a lot of wealthy folks at Eloqua that I guess were lucky enough not to get paid in cash and got paid in equity. So I'm really thrilled to see that. So literally, we didn't pay our people for 9 months in the early days of Eloqua, and not a single person left, which really is amazing. You talked about intestinal fortitude. I think in our case, we were all so young and hungry for experience, hungry for learning, that I don't think any of us really would have thought to leave, right? I mean, we could have gone off to a big company and work in a cubicle somewhere and kind of be anonymous. But, at Eloqua, we had an opportunity to really change the world. And I think that's what really motivated people. I know for me personally, in the darkest days, I would think about those sales reps that I talked to on the phone, and knowing how much of a difference that I could make for them if we could generate qualified leads for our customers. And so I had done the interviews. I knew the data cold, right? And so I knew that if I could just last another month, another quarter, another year, I knew that eventually we would make it. And I think that's what kept me going was that understanding. So I do think it's really important for entrepreneurs to not outsource that work in the early days, right? They really need to feel on their own skin. They need to really understand what the pain is in the market and feel it viscerally, because that is what, at least for me, it's what kept me going. It's what kept my team going in the early days. And I know Tony Hsieh also, and he said the same thing, right? I mean, he knew that if he could only last a little bit longer, that he was onto something big.
Good point, and I think that's a good takeaway for our audience is if you're an entrepreneur, go out there and experience the business. You know, you got to be out there and talk to your customers, talk to them, and feel their pain. So let's talk about Influitive now. I know you moved away from Eloqua. Now you kind of took the lessons learned. How did the idea of Influitive come about, and how has it gotten started?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, the idea actually came from my experiences at Eloqua, where prompted from a really smart VC who advised that I really understand how and why my customers bought from me. Like, what were the mechanics? What was the flow chart of how they bought? That VC's name is David Spock, and he wrote a great post on his blog, For Entrepreneurs blog, called The One Day Sales Cycle. And when he was talking to me, he told me the story about how he sold basically a year's worth of software in one day. Pretty amazing story, and I was absolutely galvanized by this story. So I went about trying to understand how and why my customers bought from me. And what I learned was, in every case, these best-in-class buying processes, that the ones where you close it in 4 days instead of 4 months, they would be referred in. They would see all the right stories on a website. They would have great references at the end. And so we learned, wow, this is really important. You have to surround these buyers with the appropriate, relevant social proof for them to buy quickly. So we tried a whole bunch of different things there to try to get more of that, and we really weren't very successful in most of the things that we did. And the reason why we weren't successful was, as a company, Eloqua was extremely focused on a qualified buyer, and that's a great thing to focus on. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with that, and I think really every company needs to understand its buyers. But advocates, in their advocate role, are not buying a product from your company, right? They are lending their time and their reputation to your company, and they're looking for something else. And so what I learned when talking to literally hundreds of advocates, including several we call super advocates, who do 200 different pieces of advocacy a year, what we learned was that what they were interested in was social capital and recognition, and they wanted to feel good about themselves. They wanted a greater sense of esteem. They wanted to be part of a bigger team. It was all these kind of soft factors, right? And what we noticed was that companies generally were doing a really poor job of that. The only programs that we heard consistently that were great were customer advisory board type of programs, but those didn't scale very well. Typically, not more than 20 or 30 people at the most in the customer councils. So the idea was, wow, if we can just scale up this customer council idea to provide advocates with the special kind of feelings that they would get from being a customer council, but being able to scale that to the hundreds or even thousands of advocates, that'd be a great business. Especially now where, compared to 2005, it's become even more critical, right? That 2005 was before the age of blogs, before the age of social media. Now it's just become mission critical for companies that it's so easy for buyers to connect to these to knowledgeable peers. It's now just become a mission critical thing. If you want to sell more, you've got to get those advocates out there mobilized and providing the referrals and references and stories and social media, that are so important to lubricate the buying process in this, social age that we're in.
That's interesting, Mark. I got to say, if there's one thing that has changed in the world since 2005, we're in a far noisier world than we ever were back then. You've got social media, you've got mobile devices, you've got smartphones, you've got... So talk to us about the importance of finding those advocates in such a noisy world. How do you break through the noise and get noticed?
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. It is such a noisy world. I'm having a hard time dealing with it myself, as I am just inundated with Twitter feeds and LinkedIn and blogs, and oh my God, it's even, I think it's a challenge for just about everybody now. The way that I deal with it is really I have a social filter, and I think that's what's happening with a lot of people. If two people that I know recommend a product or company, then I think it's probably something real there. Whereas, I don't even pick up my phone anymore. Actually, my phone rang twice during this interview, and it's probably a salesperson, right? There's really no good reason to pick up the phone, the office phone. I get hundreds of emails a day, right? So, the only things that I really pay attention now are the ones that get through my social filter. And so, again, that's why I think it's so important for companies to go and leverage those people that are really fervent believers in what they do, to go and get the message out. Part of the idea for the product came from just watching my wife as she went through TripAdvisor and looking to see, who would be a relevant person to pay attention to for a trip that she had in mind, right? And I think that's what we do. We really want relevance out there. And this is happening now in the software world that we participate in, right, which is being Yelpified very quickly. And you've got, App Exchange and iTunes and specialized sites like G2 Crowd and Trust Radius and IT Central Station that are rating and reviewing software. And so buyers, they're going there before they're picking up the phone. They're going there before they're filling out a web form. So I guess the question I think that every marketer should be thinking about is, how do I influence those buyers before they even come and talk to me, right? And I think the key is to do that is with advocates, and that's what you see our customers doing that. Exactly has quadrupled the number of App Exchange reviews that they have, for example, which has put them up at the top of the stack and is really influencing, the way that their prospects, think about their category. We've got other companies that have increased by 5x the number of referral leads that they get. Referral leads are so much more valuable than an ordinary lead, because not only do they close faster, but you have a much higher win rate. The cost of sales is a lot lower. And the other thing that's really cool is that when you get a lead by way of a referral, right, and you close that deal, that person is much more likely to become an advocate themselves, like 3 times or more likely to become an advocate themselves. So advocacy is like a virus, like a positive virus. Right, and so if you build advocacy into the culture of your company, maybe you find is that you really will have a very high-performing company. So that's part of really our message and what we're excited about. I mean, it's not just about selling a product to increase advocacy. We're just excited about the whole phenomenon of advocacy, and we think that a world full of advocates is a better world. Right, it's a world full of better products and services because you need to be a delighted customer generally to be an advocate. Right, so we're very excited about this world that we're helping to build, and we think that it's going to be just as transformative or maybe even more transformative than the kind of work that we did at Eloqua. I think that it can make a bigger impact on the world, and it's one of the things that keeps me really jazzed.
Really good stuff, Mark, and I like your thought about how you got to find people to champion your company before your salespeople even meet them. I mean, what great advice for the entrepreneurs out there. I'd love to talk to you longer, but we're running out of time, so let me just ask you this. Where can people learn more about you, about your new company? Where are the destinations you think they should go?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Jeff, for the question. Our website's great at Influitive.com. It's just, you see Influitive at the bottom left corner of the screen, .com. There is some more information on me there, founder and CEO section. We have a great SlideShare channel that's filled with all kinds of great stuff for marketers as well as entrepreneurs. And so that's Influitive.com that's slideshare.com/Influitive. And there's lots of great slide decks there. That you'll find case studies from our customers and also a step-by-step guide on how to build your own category. And if anybody wants to take the plunge and try to build a whole industry, I have some thoughts there on how to do it. And would really appreciate any of your comments on our ideas and technology, and love to know how we might be able to improve it.
I want to thank Mark Oregon for being a great guest on the show. As you see the Eloqua logos at the bottom of the screen, they sponsored the show last year, and they were bought out by Oracle, so that kind of went away. But they did a great job with sponsoring us, and we appreciate that. Before we go, we want to thank our sponsors. Avatage is a great content marketing company up in the Boston area. Go to avatage.com. Also digitalethos.org, and also Communication Strategy Group that is brand telling and PR stuff, and it's powered by Watchitoo, the provider of this great TV on the web platform. And Watchitoo does a great job for us. Marketing Made Simple TV premieres every Thursday at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and it encores on Sunday at noon Eastern. And it syndicates 2 weeks after its premiere, so it goes out to over 2 million people. So till next time, we'll see you again on Marketing Made Simple TV.